They are the images that simply shock the world. Under the unforgiving summer sun, a sea of Afghans beg for a way out of the country. At the airport in Kabul, on the outside, looking in. Many predicted it was a disaster waiting to happen.
I'm telling to the people, stay in their houses, do not come to this area. It's a very, very crazy situation right now.
On August 26th, a suicide blast. More than 180 people died, including 13 U.S. troops. Summer turned to winter, and the situation in Afghanistan turned increasingly grim. Afghans are firmly within the grip of Taliban leadership. There is little food, few jobs, and speaking at the United Nations a few months back, U.S. President Joe Biden made it clear the U.S. will not be sending in military muscle.
U.S. military power must be our tool of last resort, not our first. It should not be used as an answer to every problem we see around the world.
I think it was a big, bad mistake by the Biden team, by President Biden in particular. But I think it's a tragedy for Afghanistan, first and foremost. And it's a risk for American counterterrorism policy.
Michael O'Hanlon is a defense and foreign policy expert at the Brookings Institution, who has followed U.S. involvement in Afghanistan for well over a decade. Along with the nation's economic cratering, the situation is ripe for insurgents to begin training again in Afghanistan. Despite early promises by the Taliban government to respect human rights, including women's rights, events on the ground don't bear that out. Gains made during the longest U.S. war of 20 years are being stamped out. Girls are still not going to school, and activists and others have compiled reports of widespread abuses, including arbitrary arrest, public beatings, and disappearances. An all-out civil war was averted, but now hunger, starvation, and death dominate the nation.
We're probably into the many tens of thousands or low hundreds of thousands of Afghans who will die over a 12-month period from worse health care and worse food than they would have otherwise or previously expected.
A few days ago, Biden made the controversial decision to seek to free some $7 billion of Afghan money the U.S. froze once the Taliban came to power. Half the money would go to compensate family members of the 9/11 attacks, the rest to help alleviate the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan.
Unfortunately, it feels to me like all we're trying to do is mitigate the very worst extremes.
As the nation waits for the very worst of the suffering to settle in. Sean Caleb, CGTN, Washington.